sunrise is just for you. So come along and take my hand.
Hello and welcome to the Tank Club. This is my Dragonknight Tank build, Accolade, and this build is designed for players that want to do overland content, questing, dungeons, arenas, normal trials, solo content, and easier group content. This build is covering you for all of that. So before we get started, just a little disclaimer. This build is not designed for doing veteran DLC dungeons or hard modes or veteran trials. The reason for this build is for anybody who, like me, likes to play tank and you like to push those boundaries for tanking. So for me personally, I like to play as a tank for all content. I like to push those boundaries. I like to just play tank. I've got no interest in playing as damage dealer. I like to find ways to get through all the game's content while still maintaining a certain level of tankiness and still using that one-hand and shield. With this build, you are going to be able to do all of your quests, you're going to be able to do your delves, you're going to be able to solo world bosses. All of those kinds of things can be done easily with this build. When you go into kind of dungeon content, this is tanky enough and has some group benefits that you are still going to be useful in dungeon content. You are going to be able to solo normal dungeons. You are going to be able to do your daily pledges, you're going to be able to do your random normals, and they're not going to be as painful if you end up in a group with very low damage, because you are going to be able to tank and do damage. So this benefits you in that situation as well. It's not going to be optimal for doing veteran dungeons. You would be able to do your veteran base game dungeons, like your fungal grottos and your spindle clutches and things like that. You can do those on vet and still like put out some damage and make those a little bit faster. So this will be fine for those kind of vet dungeons, but overall you don't really want to go into DLC vet dungeons with this. It's not going to be good for that. It is also going to be good for doing sort of normal trials. Let's say you go into Craglor and you want to farm a normal trial. You are going to be able to complete normal trials with this build. You might need to change your gear set, but you'll still be able to output some good damage. In other content, you'll also be able to do things like normal arenas. You'll definitely be able to do some of the solo arenas like Vatishran Hollows. So people who need the Void Bash set, you're going to be able to use this build for that. You are going to be able to do Maelstrom Arena, even on Vet. So I've completed Veteran Maelstrom Arena with this build as well. So this build that we're going to be using is going to be able to output damage. It can output somewhere in the range of 30 to 50k DPS, depending on the individual player and how many different buffs and debuffs are being provided by other people in your groups. So it's a good build for doing some damage and still maintaining some tankiness. Now there are two kind of different gear options that you've got here. We've got one build which is just going to be using tank gear, so gear that you will already have as a tank. The other set is using a crafted set with the tank set. So the gear is not difficult to grab hold of. This is a build that can be used by everybody who wants to do this sort of content in a similar kind of way to myself. If you would like more end game, more optimized builds for trials, for dungeons, you can check out thetankclub.com. We have main tank builds for every trial. We have off tank builds for every trial that are optimized. And we have beginner subs for those trials, and we have all the different options you need. We also have a dungeon tank build, which is optimized for different types of dungeon groups. So you can check that out as well if you're looking for more optimized, more tank related, focused in towards just tanking. Those kind of builds are going to be there over on the website, and there's videos on YouTube as well that you can find if you take a little look. Now you could argue that you could just set up as a damage dealer and use the armory system to become a damage dealer and then switch back to tank. Absolutely, you could do that. I'm not saying you have to use this build. This is just something that I like to use for doing overland content and things like that. I like to use it because I do like to maintain certain levels of tankiness and stuff. I'm not a damage dealer. I am a tank main, and I like to play tank and do everything as a tank. Okay, let's get started with the build. So, the first thing we're looking at here is the race of this build, and I'm an Imperial. The reason for this is just because I am an Imperial. I've been an Imperial Dragonknight tank for a while now. I like to use this because it works really nicely in trial content. It works really nicely in dungeon content. It works nicely when you're being a tank. When you convert to this kind of build, it's also a little bit helpful as well. So when you look at it, the tough passive increase in max health by 2,000. Imperial Metal increase in max stamina by 2,000. And then Red Diamond is reducing the cost of all your abilities by 6%. So these are still helpful in this scenario where we are going to create this hybrid tank damage dealer build. You could use a different race if you want. You can just be whatever race your Dragonknight tank is. So the idea of this is that I'm using my normal tank build and I'm just switching the gear over and I'm just running around and killing stuff with decent damage and without too much trouble. So I'm not really doing anything different. I don't have a separate build. I'm using my regular Dragonknight tank and it's just an Imperial. So if we go and look in our character sheet, have a look at our stats here. I've tried to balance out our stats as best as I can while still giving ourselves enough stamina to give us the damage that we need. So, as you can see here, max magic at 20,300, max health is 30,700, max stamina is 31,100. We need to have high max stamina to do more damage, but we still need to have enough health for tanking and we need to have enough magicka for casting skills. On the side of recovery, if we use a potion, our recovery, 900 magicka recovery, got 1,300 health recovery and 1,000 stamina recovery. Our resistance is 23.4k spell and 22.6 physical. To obtain these stats, I've obviously got 64 points into stamina, and the way I've balanced this out is by using tri-stat glyphs. The reason I'm using tri-stat glyphs is because they yield the most value, so you get over 2,000 more overall stats by using those compared to going into an individual single glyph. So if I just went with all stamina glyphs, I'd have 2,000 less benefit from that, and I'd have to adjust my attributes more. So by putting all my points into stamina and using all tri-stat, I'm able to get a nice balance of all the stats that I'm going to need. If we have a little look at the advanced stats, the important ones here, we've got block cost, which is 869. It's quite low because we're using quite a few medium armor pieces. We're not using very much sturdy, but because we're using medium armor, the medium armor bonuses give us more block cost reduction. Another one here is block mitigation. We've got 68% block mitigation, which means we reduce the amount of damage that we take while blocking by 68%. Our crit damage is 63%. This is out of combat and with like nothing applied at the moment. And that is everything we need to look at in the advanced stats. Now if you look at our consumables, so for our consumables, the main one I'm using is Bewitched Sugar Skulls. We're using this because we want to get all 3 max stats and we want to get those as high as possible. If you are struggling for sustain, which generally you shouldn't be, you could go with some Smoked Bear. This is going to give you all of your recoveries, but you are going to lose out on quite a bit of max stats, which means you are going to lose damage. But in terms of like when you're going for more tank-based content where you may be doing dungeons, you could switch to the sustain food instead, so that you're able to sustain that chaining, the talons, the things that you need to do as a tank. But in terms of pure damage, the better one here is the Bewitched Sugar Skulls. For the potions, we're using tri-stat potions. We don't need to use anything else because we are benefiting from a certain piece of gear here with a mythic item that's giving us the general bonuses we would get from using potions. So we don't need to use weapon power potions. We can use the tri-stat potions to get the 3 recoveries and the 3 stats, which means we can use those at emergency moments or at moments where we're running low on resources. We can really push our resources down, and then we can use a potion. We can push our resources down, and we can use an ultimate. So we've got plenty of ways to gain back resources without having to worry about our recovery because we're able to benefit from the potions and the ultimates. For the Mundus Stone, we're using the Shadow. This is to provide us with more critical damage and critical healing. So this is ideal for this kind of build. If you did want to switch to the Atronach for more magic recovery, you could do that when you're going into dungeon content and you need to chain more and you're going to have more sustain issues. Go for the Magicka Recovery in that situation. Otherwise, you'll stick with the damage and the shadow. So as I mentioned before, we've got two different gear options for this build. The first option is going to be the setup that I'm going to be using, and this is the more damage focused. So with this build, I've managed to pass 50k DPS. When I'm in solo content without different buffs and stuff, it can go down anywhere between 30 to 40k. So you are able to put out a decent amount of damage. You are going to be able to get through pretty much all content in the game that you would need to as a solo player by using this setup. And it's not a bad setup at all. Let's have a little look. Right, so for the gear, we are using a monster set, and we're just using it for the one piece. So I've got the Valken Scoria monster helmet from City of Ash 2. You could also use Krags from Fungal Grotto 1, which would definitely be the easier one to get hold of. You have to do Veteran to get a monster helmet. The reason we're using this is for the one piece bonus, so the 1487 offensive pen. You could use a different monster set if you wanted. If you wanted to go with something that's sustain based, maybe with Magicka Recovery, maybe you want to get some more max stats, so you could go with a max stat. You just choose any one piece monster set that you want here, but I've gone for the offensive pen just so we're able to push a little bit more damage. The next gear set I'm using is Powerful Assault. Now, as I mentioned before, this is still a tank build, so I'm trying to use tank gear. I'm still trying to provide buffs to my group, so when I am doing group content, I'm able to provide that, but I'm also able to provide a buff to myself. So with this gear set, we're going to get max health and max stamina, which are both very nice. We also benefit from the weapon and spell damage. So we're actually using Powerful Assault here in a good way, where we're actually getting benefits for ourselves, but we're also able to benefit a group in that situation. For the 5-piece, when you cast an assault ability while in combat, you and up to 5 group members within 10 meters gain 307 weapon and spell damage for 10 seconds. So this is going to provide it to us and our group members. So we're still able to provide group buffs with this build. That is the whole reason why I'm using this Powerful Assault set, is because it works on a damage dealer, it works on a hybrid kind of situation, and it works for tanking and buffing and everything that we need it for. So a really good gear set in this situation. Alternatively, you could switch it out for something like Briarheart. So if you wanted to go more down the selfish route and less into the tank side of things, you could use something like Briarheart, which is going to give crit chance, max stamina, more crit chance, and it's going to give you weapon and spell damage when you cause critical damage, and you're also going to get a heal from it. So you could basically use Briarheart instead if you wanted to kind of switch things up and go more in an even more damage dealer route than we are right now. The next gear set we're using is a crafted gear set. Order's Wrath. This is with the High Isle chapter. You can find this in the High Isle area, and it's a really nice gear set because it's crafted. So you can set this up however you want. It doesn't matter how you set this up. So you could use Powerful Assault on the weapons and the jewelry, and then you could craft the body pieces of Order's Wrath. That would make a lot of sense because most tanks have probably already got Powerful Assault jewelry crafted. They've probably already got the weapons, so it's going to be less farming, less purchasing of gear. You might already have this stuff. With the Order's Wrath gear set, it's an easy one to craft, and it's easy to obtain. So you can make this on the body pieces or whichever slot you want. We're going to get crit chance, weapon and spell damage, and then we're going to get more crit chance again, and then increase your crit damage and crit healing by 8%. It's absolutely huge, and it's so easy to obtain as well that it's silly not to use this. The fact that it's a crafted set means we can utilize this in whichever way we want. So if you wanted to make more heavy armor pieces, you can. If you want to make more light armor pieces, you can. If you want to use it in medium, you can. You can use it however you want. So that's what is so good about this particular gear set. Now, for me personally, I've gone with the chest piece in heavy. The reason why is because using heavy armor on the chest gives the most benefit in terms of your armor and your resistances. So that's why I've done that. I've gone for the light armor on the helmet to try and get 5-1-1. So we've got 5 medium, 1 light, 1 heavy. And we're also going to benefit then from all of the different passives from our light armor, our medium armor, and our heavy armor. We're going to benefit from the heavy armor, the light armor bonuses. We're also going to benefit from the Undaunted passives. So there's lots of different things we're going to get extra by using a 5-1-1 setup. The final gear piece I'm using on this build is the Oaken Soul Ring. This is very, very good. This is one of the reasons why this build has improved so much since the last version of the Accolade tank build. Now we're able to obtain 10 major buffs and 3 minor buffs that are going to improve our damage, our survivability, our resistances, our recoveries, everything. We're going to get all sorts of different benefits there. So it's just a great piece of gear to combine into this build to make sure we're able to obtain a ton of more damage. Now, as I mentioned before, we are using tri-stat glyphs on all of our gear. This is so we can benefit from the increase of stats. So we're going to get a lot of stats by using all tri-stat. We get 2,000 plus more instead of using things like all health or all stamina. By using tri-stat, we're able to benefit by having a ton more resources, and then we can put our points all into stamina. We don't have to worry about balancing out too much. All of our gear is divines to benefit more from the Mundus Stone, which was the shadow. Everything apart from the shield. So on the shield, I did go sturdy for that block cost reduction, just to kind of take it down under that 900 mark, just so it's not too bad when we are blocking. We're not going to lose too much resources from blocking. Our one hand is sharpened. If we're in a solo situation, we are struggling to reach the pen cap. I did test a few different traits out. Sharpen gave us the most damage gain. I am using a weapon damage enchant here. DKs as tanks would usually go with the charged poison. You don't need to with this build because one of our skills is actually inflicting the poison effect. So we're getting the poison effect there and we're getting the 1,000 stamina back there. So it didn't make sense to also put it on the weapon. So we are going with the weapon damage enchant as well here. On the jewelry, I've got 3 infused, all with weapon damage. We're obviously trying to take our weapon damage up so that we can do more damage to the enemy. You could switch one of these for a magicka recovery if you wanted to, when you're going into more tank-orientated content, so when you need to chain stuff, when you need to be rooting stuff, when you need to be going into more tank-focused situations, potentially you could switch one to magicka recovery. So this was the damage setup. If you wanted to focus more into a tankier setup, you are going to lose a little bit of damage. You could use Crimson Oath's Rive, and this comes from the Dread Cellar. Now, by using this, you are not actually losing that much damage because you get additional armor, health, and armor again, but you do gain 3,541 more pen. So you are going to push yourself close to the pen cap this way. So you are going to get more damage via that source. Obviously, you are losing crit chance and a bit of spell damage and crit damage. So there is about somewhere around a 10k DPS loss potentially by using this. But if you wanted to be more of a focused into a tank situation where you can do overland content, you're still going to be able to hit 30-35k DPS with Crimson Oath and Powerful Assault. This way you're also offering more group benefits, so you're using 2 group buff sets. So that's really, really nice, because obviously Order's Wrath is not a group buff set, but it is going to provide a lot of damage to you. So you can switch this around, you can go with that. Most people have probably already got Crimson Oath. If you are going to use Crimson Oath, you're going to want to wear it on the weapons, the jewelry, and the chest piece. And then you're going to use P8 on the other slots. So that is an option. That is for you to decide. But for me personally, I'll be going with the Order's Wrath setup. Okay, now we're going to look at the skills. And this is a 1-bar build, as I mentioned. So we are performing damage with basically just 1 bar. Okay, so this is my skill bar. So first skill, Pierce Armor. Because we're a tank, we need a taunt. But by using this, we also get increased damage for ourselves. So one of the main reasons you want to use this is to inflict major breach and minor breach. That is going to debuff the enemy. When we then have the CP and the weapon that we have, so we have a sharpened weapon and things like that. So we are benefiting from a good amount of pen, which is why we're able to do a good amount of damage. So we use it for that, but it is a taunt as well for in situations where you are having to tank. Next, we have Razor Caltrops. This is used to proc Powerful Assault. This also causes damage. It applies Area of Effect Major Breach. It applies a Snare. It's basically, this is how you will crowd control on this build, because we don't have enough skill slots to apply everything that we need to be a tank and a damage dealer. So by using Caltrops, we get a Snare, we get that AoE Breach, we get some damage as well, we proc PA as well, so we can kind of use this as our crowd control skill. Even though it's not going to be as effective as something like Choking Talons or Pulsar Blockade, it's going to do a job. It's going to make it so that you are able to do some levels of crowd control. So by the time you've thrown this down, the enemies are all snared, you can go around and taunt all the enemies, before they reach the group. That should give you a little bit of a time period to get everything sorted out. So Caltrops is our next skill. Okay, next we've got Unrelenting Grip. Now, this is a very, very useful skill for a number of reasons. So, it causes fire damage when you use it. When we hit the target, we get Major Expedition. So, if you are using Crimson Oath, this is how you proc Crimson Oath. You just hit chains, it gives you Major Expedition, it then procs the Crimson Oath gear set. So, that is how you would proc Crimson Oath. If the target cannot be pulled, you restore 100% of the ability's cost. This is the most important thing about this skill. So the way we're going to be able to sustain doing damage on this build is by using this skill. So when you go into a boss fight, you throw down your skills and then you spam chains. And when you spam chains, you're able to output all of the damage that you need to do. And this is how you get that 40, 50k DPS. It's just by making sure everything's active and then spamming chains. That is literally it. And because it's free, essentially, you don't have to worry about sustain, because your stamina will only go down from recasting your Caltrops, your taunt, and for blocking, and then you stand there spamming chains. If obviously you use chains to hit adds, so smaller enemies, obviously the first time you use it, it's going to chain them in. The second time you use it, they're CC immune for 6 seconds, so then it's going to be free. So the first chain on an add, like a non-elite enemy, is going to pull it, which means you're going to consume the magicka. So you're going to consume 3,500 magicka when you chain a non-elite enemy. But if you chain it again straight after, or within 6 seconds after that, it's not going to chain, it's going to be free, so you are going to be able to do damage. And this hits really high damage from a tank perspective, especially when we've got our buffs and debuffs active, when we've got our other skills running as well. We are hitting 15, 20, 25k per chain. So it's decent, especially in combination with the other skills. Next we've got Venomous Claw, and we use this as a kind of a damage skill that's going to run for a bit of time, so we can just leave it. So it does poison damage on impact, 5,438 poison damage. It then does like almost 20k poison damage over 14 seconds. But the poison increases over the duration. So the poison seeps into the target and deals increased damage the longer it lasts, dealing 20% more damage every 2 seconds. So this hits really, really high. This is one of our hardest hitting skills, simply because it's just running and it's increasing, and it's just a good skill for us to use. It's also going to proc the poisoned effect, which means we're going to get stamina back when we use it. So when it causes poison on the enemy, we get 1,000 stamina back. So that's really, really nice. Finally, we've got a bit of a flex skill here, so we've got Draw Essence. Now, this is how you're going to heal and do damage at the same time. So I was looking for a skill that can do AoE damage for when we go into an ad pull. This is it. It does AoE damage, and it will heal you as well when it causes damage. So channel Draconic Energy to suck in the air around you, dealing 3,909 magic damage to nearby enemies and healing you for 153% of the damage caused. So if you think you've got 5 ads, you're going to hit them all for about 4k damage, and it's going to heal you for 153% of that damage that you're doing, and it's including every enemy, so all 5 enemies. So it's going to heal you huge amounts. After 2.5 seconds, you exhale fire, dealing 8,157 flame damage to nearby enemies and restoring 10% of the ability's cost for each enemy hit. Part 1, we cause magic damage, we heal, it then explodes, it does a big burst of flame damage, and it gives us magicka back. So it heals us and gives us magicka back. It's a great skill to use. And obviously the more enemies there are, the bigger the heal, the more magicka you're going to get back. So it's a really, really nice skill for healing. And finally, we've got Standard of Might. This is just too good not to use. So we put down this. It's AoE, which is great. If you needed a more burst ultimate, then we could use something different. But you want to use this for like boss fights and things like that, because it's just so strong and it runs for such a large amount of time. And because we are using the Oaken Soul Ring, we're able to get our ultimate back very fast, because we've got Major Heroism, which is going to return ultimate back very, very quickly. So we can just keep dropping this really often and doing tons of damage. So cooldown about standard, dealing flame damage every 1 second for 20 seconds. It applies Major Defile, reduces enemies healing received, which isn't really a big deal. Standing in the area increases your damage done and reduces your damage taken by 15%. So we're going to get more damage by standing inside our own standard, which is very important. It will also create a shackle synergy that's going to deal damage to enemies and AoE damage to anyone to any enemies that are still inside as well that our allies can use. So a very good skill. Now there are some other skills you could use. You could use Engulfing Flames if you wanted to for another group buff. So we are going to be able to benefit from the 6% increased flame damage by using this. So you could use this especially for ad pulls. So let's say you're going into an ad pull. Obviously, Venom Claw isn't that useful in an ad pull because an ad pull is obviously multiple targets, and this is single target. By using Engulfing Flames instead, you could breathe fire on all of the enemies, and then that would be a better damage over time skill, especially if you're combining it with your Draw Essence. So you combine those two together, and you're going to get better AoE damage. So that is something you could consider. If you did want to use a crowd control skill, you could go more into the tanky side of things and go with Choking Talons. If you are wanting to get a single target heal, a burst heal, you could use Coagulating Blood if you wanted to. That's going to give us a nice heal as well. 11.6k heal plus 50% of the missing health. So it's a nice heal, but like it's not going to do any damage. That's why we're using Draw Essence instead. In the Earthen Heart abilities, obviously you could use Stone Giant as a skill. You don't get as much DPS as the skills that we've got on our bar already by slotting this. And obviously, we need things like Caltrops to proc PA, or else there's no point running Powerful Assault. So this skill is difficult to fit into this build, because we don't really want to drop a heal. It's not going to perform better than something like Venom Claw, because Venom Claw just runs for a long duration, so it's easier to manage. So you don't really want to cause the sustain issues that you might get from using Stone Giant as a solo player. But if you wanted to, you could. Igneous Shield, again, if you're trying to go more down the safety route, let's say you're going for a more tank build, you're going into dungeon content, you need something a bit more tanky, then you could use Igneous Shield. This is going to give your group a shield and yourself a shield. It's going to give you Major Mending. It's also going to provide you group buff, which is your Minor Brutality. So you are going to provide Minor Brutality by casting Igneous Shield as well. And it's a sustain gain with Helping Hands, giving you the 1000 stamina. So it is a good skill to use if you want to use it for more group content. Another single target ultimate you could use is Soul Assault from your Soul Magic skill line. This does quite a lot of damage. It's like 100k damage in 6 seconds. It actually will hit more than this. Obviously, when you've got your things all procced and the enemy's been... you've got Pierce Armor on the enemy and you've got your Caltrops down and things like that. This is going to hit about 100k plus. So it is a decent single target ultimate. It won't do as much damage as Standard of Might, but it only lasts 6 seconds and you can generate it back faster because the cost is less. It's not too distant from Standard of Might, but it is more single target, and it is a channel, which is the only problem. It's a channeled ability, which I personally am not a huge fan of, but it does do a lot of damage. Again, another single target ultimate you could use if you wanted something even cheaper would be Flawless Dawnbreaker. This does damage and damage over time, and it's going to increase your weapon and spell damage. By having it, you also have the benefits of your passives. So you have increased weapon and spell damage by having it slotted, and you generate ultimate back when you kill an enemy. And obviously, if you go against a werewolf or a vampire, you're going to get 10% additional damage. So that's something to think about. Maybe have it leveled and ready to go, and then switch it in and out, especially if you're going against werewolves or vampires. Another really good skill is Structured Entropy, and you could use this if you need more healing. I like to use this instead of Draw Essence in some situations because it's doing a constant tick of damage. So let's say it's a 1v1 fight, so me against a boss, then Structured Entropy would be nice, especially if you don't need the burst healing. So you get a constant heal every 2 seconds, and it's doing damage over 12 seconds. So it's a good dot, and it's worth having it as well because you will unlock a bunch of passives by having this ability. So you'll also get the benefits of all your Mages Guild passives. So that is something to consider if you would like something that's going to put out a bit more damage over time for a longer duration. It means that you can spam more chains to do more damage with these chains and things like that. So Draw Essence is a good skill, but if you do want to switch it out for a 1v1 single target fight, you want to use Structured Entropy instead because you need a heal. You do need a heal for this build, so this would be a good option for healing if you needed it. There is another option for your taunt. If you wanted more of a ranged taunt, then you could slot in a beast, but this is also going to increase the damage the enemy takes by 10%. So you could use this instead of Pierce Armor, but you are going to lose the pen. So maybe consider the fact that you will want to use Pierce Armor because you want the Major Breach and the Minor Breach. But you do get Major Breach from Caltrops. So you could use Inner Beast and Caltrops along with Crimson Oath and still have the same amount of pen. So that is something to think about. So if you are using Crimson Oath, you might not necessarily need to use Pierce Armor, because then you can use Inner Beast instead and add a little bit more damage in that way. So that is everything for the skills. For your passives, you want to take all of the Ardent Flame, Draconic Power, Earthen Heart passives. You want to take the One Hand and Shield passives. You want to take all of your Light Armor passives. For the Medium Armor passives, you want Dexterity, Windwalker, Agility, Athletics. Heavy Armor, you want all of those. Undaunted, you want all of those. Racial passives, you want all of those. And then you want your medicinal use from your alchemy. Now let's move on to the champion points. So as per usual, on the green CP, you take whatever you want, but the most useful ones, Rationer, Liquid Efficiency, Steed's Blessing. In your blue CP, you want to make sure that you definitely have Quick Recovery, Elemental Aegis, Preparation, and Hardy, because that is going to reduce your incoming damage. You take everything that doesn't need to be slotted. Things like Precision are more useful at this point, and you want to take your Piercing for sure, and things like your Flawless Ritual, things like Battle Mastery, because you want to get to Mighty. Increases the damage of your physical, poison, disease, and bleed damage. Obviously, we're doing poison damage and physical damage. And we're also doing magic damage. So you want to get War Mage, because we are going to need the benefits of the flame and the magic damage and things like that. In terms of the slottables, we've got Master at Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage attacks. Chains is a direct damage attack, so we want to have this particular thing, going to increase our damage done by 6%. We also want Thaumaturge, which is going to increase our damage over time, damage by 6%. So we've got a few damage over time skills. Caltrops, Entropy if you're using it, Venomous Claw. So they're all damage over time, so we're going to get some nice benefits from that. We've got Fighting Finesse, increases your critical damage and critical healing. Very, very nice. We want both critical damage and critical healing, because we are going to be in situations where we need both of those. I did try Deadly Aim. You could use Deadly Aim if you want. This is going to increase damage by 6% with your single target attacks. But I did personally find that using Force of Nature was providing me with better damage in solo situations. But in group situations, the other one is better. So Fighting Finesse is better if you're in a group and you've got other buffs and debuffs coming in. But if you're on your own, Force of Nature with a 900 pen is the better option. For the red CP, I went with Boundless Vitality to increase our max health. I went with Fortified to bring those resistances up a little bit, to give us more damage mitigation. Then I went with Siphoning Spells and Bloody Renewal. So rather than going with something like, let's say, Rejuvenation that's going to give us 90 recovery, each time we kill an enemy, we're going to get 1,500 Magicka, and we're going to get 1,500 Stamina. Now you have to get the last hit to benefit from this, so when I was in more group-orientated content, I might switch those out for things like Expert Evasion, Rejuvenation, and Sustained by Suffering. But for solo content, there was a lot of benefit to having both of these, so I could cast more skills. It was just really, really nice. Now you do want to get all of the other passives as well that don't require to be slotted. So Defiance, Tumbling, Sprinter, Hero's Vigor, Piercing Gaze. This is kind of nice for when you need to sneak past stuff, especially in heavy armor. Tempered Soul. You want to have your Tireless Guardian and your Fortification. If you are going to be tanking harder content, then you want to be slotting Bracing Anchor. Maybe Ward Master if you're going to be slotting Igneous Shield. So you could use those for a bit more damage reduction as well. On your blue CP, if you are going into more difficult content and you need some tankier perks, then obviously you would go with Ironclad. You would take Duelist Rebuff and potentially Bulwark as well. Okay guys, so that's everything for this build. I'm going to give you a quick demonstration now on how to play this build, just so you can kind of see what we're in for. Okay, so I am going to give you a quick demonstration on this fight. Obviously, there's not many skills to think about, but as you go into combat, you want to use a potion. You want to then Pierce Armor the enemy to give him the debuff, the Major and Minor Breach. You then throw down your Caltrops to proc your Powerful Assault. Apply your Venom Claw, and then you would drop your ultimate. During the time then, you would just keep casting Chains on the enemy to do damage, and use Draw Essence when you need a heal, when you're in any kind of AoE situation, or when you're at full Magicka. So if you're at full Magicka, use Draw Essence for additional damage, and then spam chains afterwards. So it's that simple. I'm going to give you a quick demonstration now so you can see, and here we go. So that is a quick demonstration, guys. As you can see, you're just kind of refreshing everything on cooldown. That is it. So you want to put your caltrops down just before it ends, just to make sure you don't lose your powerful assault. You don't want to overlap your Venom Claw, because that will increase in damage the longer it lasts for. You want to drop your ultimate as soon as possible, because you're going to gain it back pretty quickly, because you're wearing Oaken Soul, which is giving you that major buff, providing you with that ultimate. So that is everything, guys, for this build. This was the Accolade Dragonknight Tank build for doing all your content in the game as a solo player and as a tank. I hope you enjoyed the build. If you need any more help or advice, if you want to see the written version, you can check out thetankclub.com. If you want to see this build in action, go and check out my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TC_Lee13. That's also in the description below. And if you'd like to support the Tank Club content, you can check us out over on Patreon. I appreciate you watching this video. Hopefully see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.